My son rejected $500,000 without hesitation. Not later. Not after thinking. Immediately. I don't want it, he said. The lawyer blinked, confused. Are you sure? She asked. Yes. His voice was calm. Too calm. And then he looked directly at me and added, not if it comes from him. The room went silent. Because him meant me. The money came from my business. 40 years of work. Early mornings. Missed holidays. Sacrifices I believed were for my family. And now my only son was refusing it like it was contaminated. This isn't personal, I said carefully. He laughed once. Short. Bitter. It's exactly personal. The lawyer excused herself awkwardly, leaving us alone in the office. I waited for anger to fade, for explanation to arrive. Didn't. You're throwing away your future, I said. He shook his head. No, Dad. I'm protecting it. That sentence made no sense. Protecting it from what? Money doesn't hurt people. At least that's what I believed. What did I do? I asked finally. He stared at me for a long time, like someone deciding whether truth was worth the damage. You really don't remember? He said quietly. My stomach tightened. Remember what? He pulled a folder from his bag. Old documents, photographs, contracts, and one picture near the top made my chest tighten instantly, because it showed me, 30 years younger, standing beside a man whose name I hadn't heard in decades. Where did you get this? I asked. My mother kept everything, he replied. The word mother hit differently. My late wife, gone 8 years now, yet suddenly present again. She wanted me to understand before I accepted anything from you, he said. Understand what? He slid one document toward me, a company agreement, signed by 2 names, mine and another partner's. A partner I told everyone had abandoned the company early on. A man I hadn't thought about in years. Or maybe, a man I chose not to think about. You told me he walked away, my son said quietly. That he betrayed you. Yes, I replied automatically, because that was the story. The truth I had repeated for decades. My son's voice softened. He didn't walk away, Dad. Pause. You pushed him out. The room tilted slightly, because memory suddenly felt less solid. That's not true, I said quickly, but the certainty sounded rehearsed. Old. Practiced. He opened another page. Legal settlement papers. My signature at the bottom. A number written beside it. Much smaller than the company later became worth. He sold his shares because he had no choice, my son said. And he needed money for medical treatment. I felt cold, because fragments began returning. Arguments, deadlines, pressure, choices I justified as business. He died 2 years later, my son added quietly. And you never told me. The silence after that sentence felt heavier than accusation. I built everything for this family, I whispered. My son nodded slowly. I know. Pause. That's why I need to know what it cost. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I liked the answer, because what my son knew, and I didn't yet fully remember, wasn't just about money. It was about the moment success changed who I was. I drove home in silence. Not because I was angry, because I was trying to remember, and memory wasn't cooperating. For 30 years I had told the same story. My business partner, Michael Hayes, abandoned the company during its hardest moment. Left me with debt. Left me with responsibility. Left me alone to rebuild everything. That version of events had become fact simply because I repeated it enough. To friends, to employees, to my family, eventually to myself. But now my son's words echoed differently. You pushed him out. The sentence felt impossible. And yet something inside me resisted dismissing it completely. I went straight to the garage. Old boxes lined the shelves. Things my wife never let me throw away. History matters, she used to say. I finally understood why she kept everything. After an hour of searching, I found it. A faded cardboard box labeled Hayes and Carter, 1992. Seeing both names together felt strange. like opening a door to a life I stopped visiting. Inside were contracts, invoices, early sketches of the company logo drawn by hand. Back when success wasn't guaranteed. Back when Michael and I worked 16-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and impossible optimism. We weren't just partners. We were friends. Best friends. He stood beside me at my wedding, held my newborn son before anyone else. I had forgotten how close we were. Or maybe I chose to. Then I found the letters. Hospital letters. Medical billing statements. Dates matching the year everything changed. My stomach tightened, because I remembered that year differently. I remembered stress, financial pressure, partner losing focus. But these papers told another story. Michael had been diagnosed with lymphoma. Advanced. Aggressive. Treatment expensive. Time uncertain. I sat on the garage floor staring at the documents, trying to reconcile two realities. The one I remembered, and the one written in front of me. A memory flickered. An argument in my office. Michael looking exhausted, asking to temporarily step back, asking to sell part of his shares. Not leave, just survive. I remembered my response. Cold, practical, business-minded. We can't slow down now. Investors are watching. The company comes first. At the time, it felt logical, necessary, responsible. Now it sounded different. I kept reading. Legal notes. Buyout negotiations. My handwriting everywhere. Firm. Efficient. Unemotional. The buyout amount suddenly looked small. Painfully small compared to what the company later became. At the time, it felt fair. Today, it felt final. A photograph slipped from one folder. Michael sitting in a hospital chair. Thinner. Smiling anyway. An envelope attached. Unopened. Addressed to me. My chest tightened as I opened it. Tom, I know you think I'm giving up. I'm not. I just don't know how long I'll be able to fight both cancer and business battles at the same time. I stopped breathing. I don't blame you for protecting the company. I just hope someday you understand I never wanted to leave it, or you. The words blurred, because I had convinced myself he walked away willingly. But this letter sounded like someone being left behind. I leaned back against the wall. The garage suddenly felt too quiet, because success had always been my proof that I made the right choices. Now success felt complicated. That evening I called my son. I found the box, I said. He didn't sound surprised. I know. You knew all this? Yes, he replied quietly. Mom showed me before she passed. The sentence hit hard. My wife had known the full story, and chose not to confront me while she was alive. Why now? I asked. Long pause. Because accepting your money felt like accepting a version of you I didn't understand. That hurt, but it also made sense. Inheritance isn't just money. It's meaning. Before hanging up, my son said something that unsettled me again. There's one thing you still don't know. My chest tightened. What? He had a daughter. Silence. And she's still alive. The room spun slightly, because suddenly the past wasn't finished. It was waiting, and for the first time, I wondered whether my success had quietly shaped someone else's struggle for decades. I didn't call her immediately. I sat with the information for 2 days. A daughter. Michael had a daughter, and somehow in 30 years I never asked, never checked, never wondered what happened after he disappeared from my life. Because in my version of the story, he had chosen to leave. And people who leave don't require follow-up. That belief suddenly felt fragile. My son sent me her contact information. Name Rachel Hayes. City 3 hours away. Profile picture. A woman in her early 30s, standing beside a small bookstore. She had Michael's eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. The same steady kindness. The same quiet confidence. Seeing it made my chest tighten unexpectedly. I almost closed the message. Because reaching out meant accepting responsibility for something I wasn't sure I fully understood yet. But avoidance had already stolen 30 years. I wasn't going to let it take another day. I called. Straight to voicemail. Relief mixed with disappointment. I left a message anyway. My name is Tom Carter. I worked with your father a long time ago. I almost added I'm sorry, but stopped. I didn't yet know for what. She called back that evening, her voice cautious. Yes? I introduced myself again. Silence followed. Long enough to understand she knew exactly who I was. I wondered if you'd ever call, she said. Not angry, not warm either, just prepared. We agreed to meet at her bookstore the next morning. I barely slept, because memory kept filling gaps I had ignored for decades. Michael laughing in our first office. Michael helping me move into my first house. Michael telling me becoming a father would change everything. And then, nothing. A sudden ending I never revisited. The bookstore smelled like paper and coffee. Soft music played quietly. Rachel stood behind the counter. For a moment, I saw Michael again. Same posture, same calm eyes. She studied me carefully. You look older than I imagined, she said. Fair enough. I probably am, I replied. A small smile appeared. Tension softened slightly. We sat near the window. Neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, she asked, "Why now?" Honest question. Hard answer. My son refused his inheritance, I said. And it made me realize I don't fully understand my own past. She nodded slowly. That sounds like him. Like who? I asked. My dad, she said. He believed people eventually face themselves. The words landed heavier than she intended. I thought your father left the company, I admitted. She didn't react with surprise. He told me you believed that. My chest tightened. He never corrected me. She shook her head gently. He didn't want resentment to define your success. That sentence hurt more than accusation ever could. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn notebook. My dad wrote a lot during treatment, she said. He tried to make sense of things. She slid it toward me. I hesitated before opening it. Because once again, truth waited inside paper. One entry caught my eye immediately. Tom isn't cruel. He's scared. Success feels fragile to him, and fragile people protect what they build at any cost. I stopped breathing. He understood me better than I understood myself. Another entry. I don't think he realizes what this decision means yet. Maybe someday he will. I closed the notebook slowly. Shame isn't loud. It arrives quietly, replacing certainty. What was it like after he left? I asked. Rachel looked out the window. Hard, she said simply. We sold the house. Pause. I started working at 16. No blame in her voice. Just facts. That somehow felt worse. He never hated you, she added. He said anger wastes time sick people don't have. I swallowed hard. Because forgiveness given without apology feels undeserved. I didn't know he died, I said quietly. She looked surprised. He asked your office to inform you. My stomach dropped. Office. Assistants. Messages filtered during the busiest years of expansion. How many things had success quietly hidden from me? I'm sorry, I said finally. The words felt small, late, but real. Rachel studied me carefully. I don't need an apology, she said. But I think your son needed you to understand this before accepting what came from it. That sentence changed everything. The inheritance wasn't about money. It was about meaning. Before I left, she said one more thing. My dad believed people aren't defined by their worst decision. Pause. But by what they do after they understand it. Driving home, I realized something terrifying. For 40 years, I had measured success by what I built, never by what it cost others. And now I had a choice, not about money, about accountability, because the inheritance my son refused wasn't just wealth. It was a question. What do you do when you finally understand the past differently? I didn't go straight home after leaving the bookstore. I drove aimlessly for almost an hour. Past neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Past lives that weren't mine. Thinking about one uncomfortable truth. I had spent decades believing success justified sacrifice. But nobody ever tells you that sometimes the sacrifice isn't yours to make. When I finally walked into my house, it felt different. Not smaller, just quieter. Like the walls were waiting for a decision. The inheritance documents still sat on my desk. $500,000 set aside for my son. A lifetime of work reduced to numbers on paper. For years, I believed this was proof I had been a good father. Provided, protected, succeeded. But now I wasn't sure provision and understanding were the same thing. I called my lawyer. "I want to change the terms," I said. She paused. "In what way?" I took a breath. "I want part of the inheritance redirected." "To whom?" I hesitated only briefly. "To Michael Hayes's daughter." Silence followed. Then, "Are you certain?" "No." But certainty had gotten me into this situation years ago. "Yes," I said. The next call was harder. My son answered after 2 rings. "Hey," he said cautiously. "Can we talk?" I asked. Long pause. "Okay." He came over that evening. Same guarded posture. Same careful distance. I recognized it now. Not anger, but disappointment. And disappointment hurts longer. "I met Rachel," I told him. His expression softened slightly. "You did?" "Yes." I sat across from him. "She showed me things I should have known a long time ago." He nodded quietly. "I figured she would." "I changed the inheritance," I continued. He frowned. "You don't have to do that for me." "I'm not doing it for you," I said gently. "I'm doing it because the story I told myself wasn't complete." I explained everything. The letters, the hospital records, the notebook, the parts of the past I had simplified to protect my decisions. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to punish you," he said. "I know. I just needed to know the money didn't come from something ignored." That sentence stayed with me. Ignored. Not evil. Not malicious. Just unseen consequences. "I can't change what happened," I said. "But I can decide what happens next." He looked at me carefully. For the first time since the lawyer's office, the tension in his shoulders eased. "You know," he said quietly, "Mom always said you were a good man who moved too fast sometimes." I smiled faintly. "That sounds accurate." A week later, Rachel visited. We had dinner together. Awkward at first. 2 timelines colliding decades late. But slowly, conversation replaced history. Stories about Michael I had forgotten. Stories about me she had grown up hearing. Not as a villain. As a complicated friend her father never stopped respecting. That realization lifted a weight I didn't know I carried. Months passed. My son eventually accepted the inheritance. Not as payment, but as continuation. Rachel used her portion to expand the bookstore. She named a reading room after her father. And, unexpectedly, after me too. I told her that wasn't necessary. She smiled. "It's not about necessity," she said. "It's about finishing the story correctly. Success measures what we build. Character measures what we repair once we understand the cost." My son didn't refuse my inheritance because he hated me. He refused it because he wanted to know the man behind it. And in learning the truth about my past, I finally earned the future I thought money had already secured.